Welcome to our latest episode of In Conversation with English Touring Opera. My name is Bradley Travis, and I'm the Associate Artist at Eto. We've got two great guests today. We've got the wonderful Rachel Nichols and Andrews Slater. They're joining us on quite a dreary day, unlike last week where we were all roasting. I don't know about you, James, because I know you're not actually.
It's roasting here.
Is
and
it?
It's beautiful sun. It's absolutely a perfect day.
Oh, all right. And of course, we're joined by our artistic director, James Conway. Good evening, James.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here again, and delighted to be here with Andrew and Rachel, who are two artists I esteem very highly. It's not often that you would call people your friends when they're artists that you esteem highly, but they have allowed me to become their friend because we've worked together a number of times, and also because they've both been really generous with their time and giving me advice about things with English touring opera, advice about singers. I don't think Rachel's ever sat on my side of the audition desk with me.
No. We keep trying, don't we?
I keep trying, and I'm going to keep trying because I know you would be very valuable and merciless and generous at the same time. But Andrew has, and he was bloody brilliant at it. Andrew can allow me to say this from the security of about 1,000 miles apart, but if there are 12 words worth of saying something, just about worth it, Andrew will find a way to say it in 4 words. He's a master of succinct and pithy expression. That's my statement for today. Andrew, would you approve of that?
Well, I don't like to be over verbose.
No. But you're a specialist in pith, I feel.
Okay, if that's useful, then I can do that. Well, I don't, because I play this kind of life character role of a blunt northerner who is willing to call a spade, and so sometimes it's helpful.
There, in which case that role is taken already.
Unless who's there?
John.
Oh, John. Oh, right.
John. Yeah.
Who's John?
Tomlinson.
Oh, I see. Oh, yes, of course. Oh, yes, a very distinct and estimable character as well. Our subject for today is auditions. But I thought we would approach that just by me asking you in no particular order how you got started in this business. And was there a special encourager for the beginning of your singing career? I think Andrew and Rachel are frozen.
Andrew looking thoughtful. So I went to university and did a degree in French, all the time thinking I wanted to go to music college. I didn't really know very much about music college, or whether I assumed that I would go to music college and come out able to be a singer. Obviously, that is not necessarily the case. We all know people who are not singers. We all know people who've decided not to be singers, but also not everybody who goes to music college can be a singer. But I was quite naive, and I think that probably stood me in quite good stead. And I was at the Royal College of Music as a postgrad for 4 years, doing various postgraduate things and 2 years in the opera school. And then I did a year as a junior fellow. And during that time, I met lots of wonderful, wonderful people who helped me along the way. Philip Langridge was extremely helpful in diverting me from going down the wrong path. He said, I heard you a year ago, you were singing better now than you are. You were singing better then than you are now. I think you should change teacher, which was very blunt and very helpful. And I did that, and I ended up with a great teacher, Kathleen Livingston, who was fantastic. And I won some competitions, and I got myself an agent while I was still at music college. She was a little agent. She worked very hard for me initially. Word on the street was that she was a very good agent for when you were starting, and then you should perhaps move to bigger and better things. But unfortunately, I'm afflicted with a huge amount of this thing called loyalty. So having had an enormous amount of success just out of college when I was cheap and everybody liked me, I then had a complete slump when my agent stopped working quite so hard for me and I wasn't so cheap and I was not quite right for anything. I'd done lots of little roles at Covent Garden and Peter Cassiner said, you need to do big roles with little companies, not little roles with big companies. And I did a series of disastrous auditions, not being very good at them. And James Conway gave me a remarkably useful piece of advice, which was that instead of learning 17 new pieces for every audition I did, trying to target the piece that was going to be put on by the opera companies, I should instead learn to sing 3 pieces really, really, really well and sing them at every audition I did over and over and over again. So taking that advice on board, I learnt my 3 pieces. Well, actually, I learnt 6 pieces. So I discovered that I could do 2 things with my voice. I could do my proper opera singing, which nobody particularly liked very much, or I could do my rather strange early music noise that everybody paid me a lot of money to do and booked me again and again and again and again. So I ended up with 2 totally schizophrenic sets of audition pieces. I would sing early music and get booked. I would sing my opera singing and people would go, really? We'll book you for some weird contemporary stuff, but we don't really like your voice very much. It's metallic, it's too edgy, it's too pingy, it's too horrible, it sounds like a chainsaw. Mike Rosewell was very much of the mind that my proper singing was my early music singing. And he said, she'll never have a big enough voice to sing Pamina, he said. Imagine my delight when about 10 years later, I met Mike in the pub after Andrew had been singing for him for ETO. And I went, hello, Mike, do you remember when you said I would never have a big enough voice to sing Pamina? I've just done my first ring cycle as Brunhilde. So it turned out in the end that the horrible edgy noise that I make is quite useful for certain very specific repertoire. And once I had grown into that voice, because nobody will take you seriously at all singing Wagner until you're 35, my career trajectory went whoosh, like this. It was initially masterminded by my second agent, James Black, who advised me to go into that repertoire. I then, with huge misgivings and a slightly broken heart, decided to move to a more prestigious agency. It was a very tough decision. It's probably the best thing I ever did. I now sing Wagner all over the world. Well, I did until we all had to retire because of COVID-19. There we go. That's me. In many ways, a very traditional dream come true story. Andrews is much less conventional. Go, Andrew.
Okay, unless you want to cross-examine that witness, James.
I have one question in cross-examination. So before you, well, it could be when you were doing your French degree or before that, but before you decided to go to the RCM, because let's face it, it was a second university degree, one didn't incur the same level of debt as one would incur now in doing a second university degree. But was there a person who at any point said to you, you have a lovely voice, you should be a singer, in a way that meant something to you?
Yes, there were several people, and all of those people were connected with Bedfordshire Education Service. I grew up in Bedfordshire, and we had this absolutely wonderful thing called Bedfordshire Youth Opera, which I'm glad to say still exists. Every year, young people between the ages of 15 and 25 put on a fully staged opera with orchestra. It's an incredible thing.
And who funds that?
I fundraised to stop it going bust. One of the answers. Friends of Bedfordshire Music fundraise to keep it going. There is a small amount of money allocated by the Education Service still, I believe, but I'd have to check that.
It used to be funded by the Education Service, didn't it?
Completely.
Yep.
But we've, on a shoestring, kept it going, just about. And the people who were involved with that were very positive about my singing. My school music teacher, Michael Gleason, absolutely 100% behind me. He was a bit disappointed I wanted to do a degree in French. He thought I should go to Oxford or Cambridge to read music, but I didn't want to do that. So the person, I suppose, whose advice I took most seriously was Michael Rose, who was a conductor in Bedford. He'd been the county music advisor, and he was absolutely convinced that I had what it took.
Are there still county music advisors? Does anyone?
In a smaller way, yes. I mean, Bedfordshire, I know about Bedfordshire because obviously I'm still helping out running the youth opera, and there is still somebody in charge of music in Bedfordshire and music in Luton. The two councils split. So there is somebody. In fact, those of you who know Rebecca Baritone, her brother is the guy in charge of it in Luton. He's putting on all sorts of amazing extracurricular activities for people who are at for everybody, but primarily aimed at people who are at state school, where there are fewer and fewer schools running A-level music. Ben is trying to put loads of stuff on so these people can still sing and play and make music together and do it at a high level and receive that education. So if they decide they want to pursue it, they can.
That's a very positive thing to hear, because I don't hear the same from every county. I often wonder who are the generous people who are in a position to identify talent that is not coming out of Oxbridge. Not that there's anything wrong with talent coming out of Oxbridge, but there's an elegant supply of people teaching there and visiting there and looking for anybody who's got any kind of a Tweety Bird little voice. And I just wonder if there are still these kind of angels who encourage people to think that this rather outlandish, rather foolish, highly selective, very exciting career is a possibility.
Yes, there are some, but it's incumbent on us who've come through the system in more generous times to be those people. We must be those people. We must foster new talent. Roderick Williams has put together an amazing new initiative with Barbara Hannigan, aimed at being those angels. If you're doing a recital, you give 10 minutes of your recital and a proportion of your fee to a younger singer. You give them a platform, you give them a helping hand, and we must be those people. I can't evangelise enough about that.
What a good idea. I must see whether or not there's a possibility to do that in the autumn with our monodramas. But now let us turn to Andrew's access to this profession.
Okay. I always start, when this comes up in radio interviews, I always declare that I only really became an opera singer because my piano teachers all used to die. And it's perfectly true. A series of ladies who were generally old and left over from the war, or widows or whatever, they would be giving piano lessons, and not directly as a result of working with me, but they died. So my parents found me a young one who also happened to be
dead. They pretended to be dead.
Maybe it's pretense. They said, I'm not doing him. So they got a young one who was the young teacher at the music school called Marion Smith, or she married somebody. Anyway, doesn't matter. She was Miss Smith when I was there, and that meant that I was under control within the comprehensive school that I was a pupil at. Whenever anything musical needed to happen in the school, Slater will do it. So there, I was forced, therefore, to, if they wanted somebody to bang the drums in the school band, because I'm a very talented thing, but I can bang drums, or play the violin in the orchestra, or at the time there was still shows put on, Gilbert and Sullivan shows in the school show, with half the staff being comical performers, and I was drafted into that, and I did some of my finest roles before I was the age of 17. But of course I was being hothoused as a scientist to be sent off to medical school, which was fine. although it turns out not. So this was just my hobby. You know, I could do some singing, and I was a big show off, so that was easy. I could stand up and make everybody look at me and tell a story. And to a certain extent, the people who want to do that, who are good at that, find their own opportunities to do that. So having somebody who's special come and choose you and put you forward for things, yeah, I'm not sure how necessary at a school age that is. As long as there are some things happening that you can go and put yourself forwards for. Really happy anecdote. One periodically at university, where Rachel and I both teach, we put on an opera, and basically the children in the second year and third year, they do it as part of their course. And on the first day of auditions that we had, this tiny little girl came in and went, "Hello, please can I sing?" And she was like just a first year, and she'd heard about it and wanted to be in it. And now she studies still with Rachel, and she's really great. But it was only because she went, "I want to do it. Please can I be in it?" And she was a tiny little thing.
And she makes other people do it. It's just lovely.
There we go. So, but it's only, I think, only the people who are willing to be, "Whoa, I want to do this," are going to have a chance to be it anyway. So if somebody who's waiting to be chosen and "Oh, please choose me," then I don't know whether it's worth their bother being picked up.
I wonder about that, Andrew. I mean, I really get your point that you need to have a terrific amount of belief in yourself to persist in this career. But at the same time, I mean, I know people who kind of were in recorder groups because it was all the music there was at their school. And someone took a shine to them. I do think that there are a lot of people who discover who they are rather than people who know who they are and are enabled by sheer force of will to get where they need to be. You know, there's all kinds of different folk. And I think it's quite tricky now. You know, you mentioned Rebecca Bottone, but wasn't her dad an amazing singer? And
still is.
I'm not sure.
He still is.
Yeah. But in that generation, there were quite a few people who were not necessarily music college candidates right away, who were kind of found and encouraged. I'm thinking, you know who I'm thinking of right now? That guy Remedios, who had an amazing tenor voice.
Yeah.
And I think he was sort of found somewhere, wasn't he?
So, can I carry on my story, which is relevant? Having gone through various things and being encouraged in different ways by different people, "Oh, come and be in my thing. We need somebody who's loud and can show off." Eventually, I decided to have a go at being an opera singer, and there was a thing called an advice audition at a conservatoire. You paid £5, sang to the boss. If they thought you had any potential, they said, "Yeah, come on," and they did. They said, "Come and start in September. Be a postgrad opera singing course person." So, I mean, I think these things still exist. It might cost £70 now.
Yeah, Andrew, I did it before I went to the Royal Northern, but it did cost a little more than £5.
Okay. Well, this is, you know, in the 80s, I suppose. And so, but that Joseph Ward, therefore, was the man who said, "Oh yeah, no, you're interesting. Come on, we will polish you, and then see what happens." And so then there are secret people working behind you who are manipulating the course of your career, like the Glyndebourne Prize thing. They just sort of, "Oh, he seems to be doing all right. Maybe he'll be all right." And then, oh, you're given prizes, and it's beautiful, it's lovely, but it's a bit out of your control. I mean, you're not. I don't think being really arse-licky, for wanting a better word, makes it more likely that you are given these prizes and things. They like the mystery.
Yeah, well, having, you know, I remember, this is something I shouldn't admit. Oh, Bradley, Please don't record this. But I remember the first time I was
It is being
asked-
recorded, James. Stop.
Stop!
Stop.
But the first time I sat on a panel for an award thing, and I haven't done it very often. I was asked a couple of times, and I said, "I'm not qualified. What are you asking me for? I mean, I run an opera company, but I take a lot of advice, and I shop around, and it's not that hard. I wouldn't be the best person for identifying some unrecognizable talent or something like that." And so I said no the first year. I said no the second year, and then the third year I thought, bloody hell, I might as well do it. I can just keep quiet, as if I could keep quiet. And then when I was on the Bloomin' panel, I thought, holy cow, there is one other person in this room that has any idea what they're talking about. And, there's a lot of singing competitions that are a bit like that. You get your place and you circulate around, and you're on panels here and panels there. I mean, sometimes I wonder how people have time to do jobs, because they're always on international panels everywhere. And I think we should be a tiny bit skeptical about how, I do think prizes are, I'll just stop here. Prizes are marvelous things. Marvelous things.
Awarded based on who will do best prestige-wise for the competition. That was the advice when I sit on the panel. We don't want the person who sings best. We want the person who will make our competition more famous. So if you're a tenor, you win.
Judged the Wagner competition. It's only the second competition that I've judged. The first competition was the big shiny prize at the Royal Scottish Academy, and it was much more in terms of the person who sings best gets the prize. In terms of the Wagner competition, it was all about specifically potential for singing Wagner. And so it was a very different ballgame. So I think some prizes are very focused and can be extremely useful in predicting success, and other prizes really not. And both of those situations, being quite new to judging competitions, I, like James, felt, why am I qualified to do this? And then once on these panels, thought, actually, I do have a lot of things to say, and I think the things that I say are important in terms of recognising this person could do this because, particularly for the Wagner.
I guess that's very similar to sitting on an audition panel, isn't it, really? When there's something more specific to be kind of listening for, rather than who wins this shiny prize, rather this is a very specific thing, and we need someone who has that blade or metal or whatever in their voice to get over those big orchestras. That would, I guess. So, James, is it something that, I suppose when you're doing a general audition, it's different because you just kind of listen to quality and how people might fit into the company and lots of things. But if you're going for specific roles, then I suppose you're listening to very particular things.
For sure. I mean, general auditions, you want to try to have as few preconditions as possible, because general auditions are they're for everybody that writes to you, that pays taxes, so deserves to be heard. And doesn't really, sometimes you just think, okay, stop looking at the CV, take the call, hear the person. General auditions are really, really important, because access has to be broad, has to be open. We have to be open-minded, and that should guide repertoire choices as well, because you may hear amazing young talent and think, what, I'm doing the wrong shows. I got to do the shows that show off some of these people, whether they're new people or people that have been around for a while or are changing or something like that. That you have to think that way. And also, we make a practice at ETO, or try to, of always having a singer on the panel with me, a singer who's giving their time. So it's a kind of putting back into the profession. And then somebody else who could be a conductor, quite often conductors. I mean, when we had a music director, it was sometimes a music director and we will have a music director again, but usually a third person or someone, say a rep or a coach who has worked with the company a while. Often I actually kind of audition conductors by asking them to be on audition panels, because I think, well, I'm considering you because you're musical, fine. And people say you can conduct. I don't know, but they say you can. Now I want to see how respectful you are of other adults who have trained for a long time, who are auditioning for to work with the company. Because if you're not respectful and you don't really know anything about singing, well, you should work somewhere else. You know, you won't bring anything to me, no matter how good a musician you are. So lots of experienced singers have been on audition panels with me, and their technical knowledge, above all else, is really so valuable to me. I can't thank them enough. And also I really enjoy the experience because I learn an awful lot from it. And that means that at they're usually at sort of second round of auditions of people that I know that could bring something to the company, and you're looking for a specific application for their talent. But I think what I bring to a panel is a sense of, will the audience like them? Because that is another important thing. I love our audiences. I talk to people in the audience, as people here will testify. I mean, I like being in the foyer. I really like working the intervals. I mean, I call it work, but it's pleasure. At the same time, I know that who people like is not necessarily who's best. I'm sometimes just astonished that singers of outstanding technical accomplishment sometimes make it sound too easy, and audiences warm to effort. So sometimes in auditions, I'm thinking, yeah, now there are this many great people. I want to work with the best, but I have to work with people who have a chance of being appreciated. And also I have to take some guesses about whether or not they can act, because you don't get much of a sense of that in an audition. The only way I can tell is if they're generous enough to bring themselves into the room. If they bring somebody else into the room, someone anonymous, I don't think they're going to be able to bring themselves to the stage. If they bring in a specific
performers, please, sir, under those circumstances, it's really hard from a performer point of view. We like to demonstrate our blank canvas. You can have us however you want, but you prefer us to. And actually, myself, for the few auditions I ever do these days, I will just be me, hyped up. But really, you'll know from the first days of rehearsals, we like to come blank. You can mold us however you want. Otherwise, we're just being us each time.
Yep, but Andrew, your blank is you. I mean, if somebody comes in and does some big scary act where they're acting out every aspect of the aria and they start getting closer to you, as some people do, they get terribly close and kneel down and cry and do scary things. I just think, okay, they've got one performance and they're nuts. So no, I want somebody who can bring themselves to the stage, because whatever character they make is made from themselves, is made from stuff they find in themselves. And that's the way you move people. If it's all put on top, if it's all icing and no cake, it's not going to move anybody, for sure. So that's my only way of judging an actor in an audition, is whether or not I can tell who they are somehow. Something about them, not everything about them. I don't want to know everything about them. I really don't want to know everything about them. But I want to know if they're generous enough to be there with me, rather than pretend I'm not there. I suppose that's the small bit that I bring to audition, and that's why I try to be on auditions with experts like you. But I'd like to hear from you about your experiences of auditions, whether they're worth doing at all, whether they tell anything, and also what it's like to be on the other side of the table, how that feels. you know, the table, the symbol of power that you put between you and the person who's auditioning. For me, it's very practical, because if I don't write down, I don't remember, and you're not allowed to take people's pictures. So anyhow, tell me about that. What are there good auditions, bad auditions? What are good auditions like? And why is auditioning for me the very best kind of audition there is?
Well, I can certainly agree with that last bit. Auditioning for ETO is the best. And one of the very pragmatic reasons why it's the best, James, is because you always have somebody really good playing the piano. The auditions are always really well organised. You've always got them in a good venue with a reasonable amount of space and a reasonable acoustic. There is always somewhere to warm up. And it is these things that sound comparatively little that make our experience on the other side of the table bearable. Because auditions are the things that, unless you are a very unusual person, you dread and they give you nightmares. They're horrible. We do hundreds and hundreds of auditions and get a very, very few number of jobs, if we're lucky, from those auditions. So normally it's a no. And therefore, if the experience of going to the audition and sharing you on a plate, and I would hope that I am one of those people that James refers to, who says, when he says, I want someone to be generous enough to be in the room, I'm always in the room. I serve up my very best singing and all of my things that make me Rachel, all of my life experience, and I give it to you on a plate, and I've practiced my pieces, and I really, really try to give you an insight into what I'm like as an artist. And that sharing is like peeling bits of skin off yourself. It is an intensely painful and difficult process, when actually what you'll normally hear back from that process is, thank you very much, but no thank you. Now, the other thing that's absolutely fantastic about ETO is that instead of it just being no thank you, it is feedback. People can ask for feedback, and it makes all the difference in the world to the young singers who I am now teaching and sending to James. Of course they are disappointed if they don't get a role. Of course they are disappointed if he says no. But at least he gives them some feedback that shows he's actually bothered to listen to them and to watch them. And that is a generosity of James and of the company, because these people have been heard, and they've been heard properly. And that is completely important.
From my point of view as an audition person, I find the most effective thing is to not go. I mean, it sounds as though I'm being facetious, but actually, if I say, I'm really interested in your project, I'm available on the dates that you want, unfortunately, I can't come to the audition day, then they hear all the other people who they might want to have, and they all sing something wrong, or there's something wrong about them, and the fallback position is, oh, well, we'll have Andrew. And that works much better for me than turning up and putting on my suit. I don't know why. And it's always been the case, I think, that for general auditions, nah, I don't think I've ever got a job from a general audition. For a specific thing, somebody rings me up and goes, can you just sing, I don't know, Sharon to the director? I can go along there and be me, an outsized version of me, and then they choose yes or no, and that seems fair. No, he's too fat or too tall. I wanted a blacker man. I wanted all these things that are possible, and I don't mind that. That's all right. But the actual just going in here, here's me, choose me for something that is too general. I can't do that. I don't win.
You ever had to?
I'm a person who's come second in a competition with only me in it, I should point out. It was the Baritone Prize in Southport Arts Festival. We won't be awarding a first prize in this category. Andrews Slater is second. What? How fair is that? So, well, competitive singing, not so much me.
Oh my God, how awful. Have you ever had to sit in a corridor lined with chairs and you know, so be with 4 or 5 or 3 or 6 or however many people waiting
Yes.
for your turn.
And the Americans really, really, really come to the fore in the corridor, because the Americans are very, very good at telling you how absolutely fantastic they were in the last 5 things they've been in, and why they completely deserve to get the role, and they're going to do a fantastic audition because they've had some extra special audition coaching with this brilliant person. They've told them exactly the right thing to do, and they've done all the research. So really, the job is theirs. And we, as English people, sit there going, "Yes, I'm not very good, and I don't really know why I'm here." It's hilarious. We're so self-effacing, and we just want to hide under the chairs. And the Americans just go, "I'm brilliant. This is why I'm brilliant." And there's nothing wrong with it, but as English people, we just find it so awful. I mean,
that's more the international audition type of thing that you would go to, isn't it? What happens with domestic ones, just in this country, is it's just your mates. Yeah. So on a couple of occasions, I've actually had the panel come out and tell me off for being me and the other people who are auditioning, having too much fun and laughing and joking around before we go in. I don't think it's very good for our whether we do it or succeed or not, but singers, they're really loud.
I remember not some time ago, we auditioned in a place where there wasn't a warm-up room. It was, we'd meant to book one, and somehow it wasn't there, or I don't know what the story was. Oh, cripes. I just wanted to call the day off. And then I also looked outside and I saw 7 chairs lined up.
No.
And then I went and looked at the sheet, and the sheet had a number of people who were auditioning for the same part, auditioning in sequence.
Yes.
So they would see their rivals.
Yes.
And I thought, holy cripes, we want people, I want to hear the best people can do, not the worst they can do. I don't want to wind them up before they come in to sing for me. Oh dear.
I think the last audition I did was in Basel for Eric Nielsen, and I had been sent over there to audition for Lady Macbeth in Verdi's Macbeth, which is a role that I had performed in English. I'd never performed it in Italian at that time. Since I have done it, but I don't think it's particularly my role. I very much enjoy doing it. I love her. I love playing her. I love everything about that opera. It's fantastic. But I don't sound like a proper Verdi soprano singing it, because I am not an Italianate singer. And for all you can say it can be done by a more Germanic sound, that's all very well and good when you're sat on the 7 chairs, listening to the other 6 people auditioning for Lady Macbeth, all doing a proper Verdi soprano, hard palate, floaty thing that they can do. And I sat there listening to number 1, 2, 3, and of course I was last. So I listened to 6 of them, and I thought, I don't know what to do. I thought, well, I can sing La Luce Langue well, so I'll do that. And then I thought, I'm afraid I thought bollocks to it is what I thought. So I went in, and Eric said, "What would you like to sing to us?" And I said, "Actually, could I sing you some German repertoire, please?" And I sang Abscheuliche from Fidelio, and I sang some Wagner, and then I got cast as Electra.
Oh, how smart. How smart. Well done.
It was only because I heard all the others doing the proper thing. I know I can't do that, so I did the thing I could do instead of trying to do the thing I couldn't do. And it turned out it was a big punt, but it paid off.
I think that's it's really it's really interesting that, because I've had the auditions where you sort of think, like, what do the panel want me to sing? Like, what do they expect? Someone of my age or whatever, like, what do they expect me to sing? And then more recently, I started just doing actually, I know I'm really good at these things, and I know that I'm really good at, you know, doing characterful things, and I can do this other role well. And I just enjoyed the auditions far more because I was just selling me rather than a version of what I thought that people thought I should be. And I think that, you know, that's kind of the same thing, isn't it, Rachel? That you just got to be
Yeah.
true to yourself and what you're good at.
There is a kind of hierarchy of roles that coaches and teachers like to push people through, and they see it as a progression that should be universally done. And I don't think that's always very helpful, because it's more interesting what the individual does with that particular role. It might not be the usual one that they've got on records, but it might be even more exciting. So the normal pathway route, first you must start with your Mozart roles and maybe occasional Handels. Then you might go on to a little bit of Verdi, but only the minor Verdis, and perhaps you can progress through there as your voice develops more. You can, I think it's, I don't really approve of that. I mean, but some people do. Oh, attention.
I guess it really depends on the singer in a way. I completely agree with you, Andrew, because I think so many things would sound better if they were sung in a bel canto way, but what the hell do I know? I want to ask you now about, oh shoot, I had something good to say. It was about the bit, what you said, Bradley, about doing what you can do well, because something that is the most common experience sitting on, now I get depressed, I'm going to confess this, often for days after a long day of auditions. Now, it should be a privilege to get to hear so many hardworking people audition and sing beautiful things and all that. It's not something you'd choose to do for several hours a day, really, like 6 or 7, maybe 8. But anyway, I get depressed because there are so many people. There's so many people who are so good, who are not in job, or are not finding what they can do, especially people who aren't known, because it's quite difficult to get your foot on if the CV doesn't say X, Y, Z, that you've already done some roles. And depressed also about a lot of people who, when you're in the room with a good proportion of people who don't seem to know where their voice is. I mean, you've said that, Bradley. You've said that, Andrew, on a panel with me, even though you've said that, you should be able to sing all kinds of roles and stuff like that. But people come in and sing stuff which is just, well, way too big or way too florid for, way too fast moving. Sometimes people come in and show you what they can't do rather than showing you what they can do. I don't know. I find that really depressing because, there's been a lot of, they've invested so much energy and time and money, but maybe it's like that in every profession, maybe because I do a lot of interviews for administrative jobs. And sometimes I think, really? You thought you could do that when you're obviously so good at doing other things? I don't know. What do you feel about this? That
when I was sitting with you one time, and it was possibly a general audition, about 5 girls came in, all beautiful women, all dressed up nicely, and they all sang Visidate or something, and they were all absolutely fabulous. And every single one of them could sing that. And it might be an answer to your question, is that any of them would do. You didn't need one, as it turned out. But so they try to find a niche which isn't the thing. So they go, I must do, I don't know, a massive Donizetti aria instead, because everybody can, it seems, can sing beautiful Visidate.
Yeah, Visidate is a bit like Paul Giamore. It's basically grade 4. So it's really, really not very hard. And it doesn't ever show you whether you can sing Tosca or not. If you can sing it, because everybody can sing Visidate, and not very many people can sing Tosca. So yeah, it's a deceptive piece.
Oh, Un Bel Di as well, is they do one after the other.
Yeah.
Visidate, Un Bel Di, Visidate, Un Bel Di. Yeah. So that, and they're both the sort of grade 6.
There's a terrible lot of people who can sing Visidate, but they wouldn't be able to sing it in a show when it got to that time of night, would they?
Yeah.
No.
If they'd gone through the rest of it.
And finding a niche thing, I understandably, because I am somebody who has had a very well publicised change of repertoire, you know, from Bach to Brunhilde in 10 minutes. I get a lot of students or professional singers coming to me for me to advise them about changing repertoire. Often women in their 30s who are finding that they've come up against this not being booked thing. They're potentially, if they're in their late 30s, possibly starting to be told, bring age non-specific repertoire to auditions, which is something I'd really like James to talk about in a minute, because I'm sure if anybody else brings him the embroidery aria from Peter Grimes, he's going to shoot them, because this is what everybody who is 35 plus takes to auditions, because we're told you won't be cast as an ingenue anymore, you don't look right, so therefore you've got to be Ellen Orford because nobody knows how old she is. If you're a soprano, if you're a mezzo, you can be an old bag, but there aren't any old bags who are sopranos. So you either have to be Ellen Orford, or you have to change repertoire and do what I did and dodge the aging soprano bullet by singing music that you can't sing till you're 40. And I get a lot of people who actually still sing Susanna from The Marriage of Figaro really, really beautifully, but they're trying to change into heavier repertoire because they feel they should because of their age. And I find that very sad, but I don't know what the answer to that is.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, why does Susanna have to be a kid? There's no reason.
Exactly. Because Marcellina is, if you've got to, I guess, think about the age of the whole cast. But of course, there's no reason why Susanna should be a kid.
She doesn't have to be younger than the Countess. I mean, the Countess, we know her age because of Barbara. She should be a little older than Barbarina, I suppose. I don't know. I think it's tough for lyric sopranos.
It depends when you're.
I think it's very tough for lyric sopranos.
Yeah.
Because they lyric sopranos quite often try to become something else when they're still lyric sopranos.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. But then there's an awful lot of Verdi that is well sung by lyric sopranos.
That's
I think.
Also true.
It depends on where, depends on how many people in the band and how exposed the pit is. More particularly, it depends on who the conductor is and whether they thrive on making, whether they feel that they will get more applause from making a really loud noise, as is common enough.
Those in quite prestigious jobs.
Yes, it's true. But we have to be careful again because this is being recorded. So I'm going to ask you, Andrew, did you like being on the other side of the desk and hearing people and all that? I guess I know because you teach a lot, you have taught a lot.
I only teach 1 day a week. It's not like a lot, but it's just been lots of days by doing it for a long time.
Doing it for a long time, yeah. So you've been on the other side of the desk in a way, and you'd be a brilliant director. You probably are. And if more people wanted to give you a shot as a director, you'd be an even better director. But how did it feel sitting on the other side of the desk in an audition thing? It didn't depress you. I remember you were still quite jolly at the end of the day.
No, it's very enlightening to see. As I say, I've retired from auditioning, so this I haven't. It's maybe 5 years ago or so that I last sat with you properly, listening to the singers coming in. At that stage, probably I was still considering myself as an auditioning person who might at some point do some more auditions, and it was fun to see the things that the people auditioning to us would do that I would do that I now wouldn't do, if that's not too convoluted. They'd all come in and march up and shake hands with all the panel, and we didn't really want you to do that. I don't care if you sing well or not now. That's it.
No.
Oh, you see,
or whatever affectation they do.
Told to do that at music college.
Oh, there you go.
We're told to shake hands.
I use that as an example of the sort of thing that we might not really fancy, and you've been told to do it, so that's already off-putting. And also, you were right. A lot of them are doing their thing. They're inside their heads, they're doing their best performance, their best sounds, and they're emoting the feeling, but they're not really being themselves singing that song. So yeah, you can see the blank come down, and it's an exam blank. It's associated board blank, because that's the way you're measured in the exams that you do through school, and to a certain extent through university. You don't seem, I mean, we try to, in our department, make it so that you can get more points for pizzazz, as I would call it. And really, truly, somebody doing singing at university for their degree, the level of communication that they can do is more of a transferable skill than their skill in singing. So if they need to be good at the selling bit, even more than the singing bit, because they're only up to age 21, their voices might still change after that. So, yeah. So seeing the people coming in, the ones who I love in auditions, probably you love them as well, are the ones who are, well, more like me. What can I say? Or even more like James, you know, come in, say, hello, I'm great. Right. So that was my recollection from doing them. It's it's very good for analysing your own performance in that circumstance.
I've often heard that it changes how people feel about the experience of auditioning. And I often think that I should invite people who say that auditions feel terrible to come and sit on the other side, because it just might make it feel easier.
Well, they realise it is terrible.
I mean, I've been on group panels. We used to do this thing in Ireland. They did it every year because the Arts Council would pay for it. And sometimes they'd buy dinner afterwards. This was in the old days when they were a bit flash with cash. And all the Irish companies had to be there. Now, the Arts Council did it because they wanted the Irish companies to invest in Irish singers. And some of them, you know, cheapers, they'd never bother hearing an Irish singer for their lives. They just brought their old mates from wherever they were. But, oh God, it was a horrible day. Those things, when you have a number of companies, they're just so competitive and unpleasant and, you know, scary. And gosh, I remember sitting on a panel once with a guy a person who made more noises to do with postnasal drip than I've ever heard in my life. And I was thinking, how can you hear anything? You never stop clearing your voice. I can't hear anything. But this was a permanent feature of this person who actually ran 3 companies. So I don't know, yeah, those groupie things are terribly unpleasant. I still don't know how to do it. I just think, I feel so strongly that the career structure of performing artists is not structured in a way that people can feel powerful.
No.
And people are at their best when they feel powerful. Not like powerful over other people, but personally powerful. And, you know, that's what if you're any good in rehearsals for a show, you want to make people feel really at home in the part, as powerful as they can be, powerful enough to relax enough to be generous and collaborative. But in auditions, somehow we haven't got it right for how to enable people to feel powerful, unless they're like megastars, in which case they don't audition.
I think one of the ways that people sometimes help, and I always sort of found these the best auditions, is when there's some element of working with the singer. So it's if you're either the conductor who might be there or the director, but it's a time thing, because it takes more time, you know, then you probably need a 15-minute slot rather than a 7-minute slot. And if you're doing a load of auditions, it's tricky. I'd just like to, before we finish, because we're running out of time, just open it up. If anybody else has any questions they'd like to ask, to put it in the chat function, and I'll bring them in. But have you found that, Rachel, that it's nicer if people work with you?
Yes, I mean, I don't audition anymore at all. I do sometimes do working sessions. I enjoy working sessions. It enables me to see if I like working with the person, and for them to see if they like working with me. I can't think of anything worse than rehearsing an opera for 7 or 8 weeks, bearing in mind how long the operas I tend to do are, if you don't have any kind of positive chemistry with the person. It would be horrible. But for what it's worth, I've taken that on board in the auditions that I run for the prospective new students at Huddersfield University. They're babies. They come and audition for me when they're 17 or 18. But we do a workshop. So we all come into the room. We all sing in front of each other, and I do a masterclass. And hopefully, even if they found the whole experience of singing in front of other people terribly traumatic, they can at least take something useful away, which I think is a big way towards people feeling more positive about auditions.
Very good for recruitment as well, dear. Well done.
Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. I think we've covered everything. So
I want you to recommend, by way of postscript, has to be very short. Postscript. Okay, Andrew and Rachel. Andrew's done millions of roles for ETO because we've been really lucky. Rachel, we haven't been lucky enough to have her do millions of roles.
Andrew and I base our entire self-worth as to whether we are good enough to be in ETO this year. Seriously, we have this conversation. And Andrew, well, I'm good enough to be an ETO, but you're not good enough to be an ETO this year. So there we are. That's how strongly we feel about it.
What's your favorite ETO role you've done, or experience, or show, or night? What was your favorite?
My favourite ETO experience was being Ginevra in Ariadante in Buxton when Andrew forgot his words. I was kneeling down, as usual. Andrew was playing my dad, because that's what tends to happen. And I'm kneeling, facing upstage. Fortunately, Andrew is in a wheelchair as King Donald, and he's entirely preoccupied with not falling into the pit, because there is a steep rake at Buxton. And he parks his wheelchair, but it's not particularly stable. And he's wiggling around in it. And he started singing, puts his hand on my head, and he started singing, "The world ordains I you." At which point I went, "This is brilliant. He's forgotten his words." And of course I could have told him what they were, but instead I thought it was so funny that I couldn't control myself. So I was shaking with laughter, trying not to be singing. He did the whole A section, "The world ordains I'm you." He did the B section. I thought, he's going to remember now. He's going to remember. He didn't. He did an ornamented A section. The word he had forgotten was the word forget.
Oh, I was just trying. I did that translation. I couldn't remember what the
gold
was. Andrew, you have to come back now. What was your favorite ETO show?
You see, I'm vindicated. I love all the shows. I get to be an old gentleman who's cross and thwarted. It's the most fabulous evening in the theatre to be. So, I mean, in Flavio, I was really cross. In Barbara Barbiere, I was. And if there's a girl, and you usually get beautiful girls, I always have to paw them and stuff, and they pretend that they don't like it. Well, that's a good evening for me, really.
And of course, that never happens because the director doesn't allow it to happen, and our rehearsals are safe and careful places. Well, yes. So it wasn't King Priam then playing the old guy.
No, because you wouldn't let me be King Priam.
Well, or I think it was Ariadante.
He's still big.
Okay. Well, now that we know that, we can carry on our evenings. Thank you so much. It's so good to see the two of you, and thank you for all you have given to ETO, and you will continue to give to ETO. Our artistic partnership has enriched my life and taught me a great deal. So thank you. And thank you all for listening into our conversation. I know Bradley has to do the closing remarks, but I thought I'd just do a preliminary closing.
Stepping on my toes now, James. No, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Rachel and Andrew, for joining us. It's really kind of you to join. I just wanted to say, there's some people who are joining us every week. I just want to say thank you to you. It's really fantastic to have you with us. Next week, we have the editor of Opera Magazine with us, John Allison. who's going to talk to James about all things opera and the future. But thank you for being. Yeah, James looks scared about that prospect. But have a lovely evening and see you next time. Bye.